All right, so when we're starting a brand new game, especially for new players, we'll be starting as the Ottomans, since the Ottomans are, of course, the nation that I recommend over anything for new players. Um, you can mess with your options, but we already went over that before. I'm leaving on hard since that's my normal difficulty. So this will be on hard as Ottomans, but everything here will apply for normal difficulty or anything else that you want to play on. As a new player, I assume you're going to play on normal or easy or even very easy, and don't feel bad if you feel that you need to put the game on easy or very easy, because that's perfectly fine. Once you learn the game, I highly recommend putting the difficulty up. Like I said, hard is my normal difficulty. But play at whatever makes you comfortable and whatever you enjoy. That's the one thing about Europa is you don't have to play it in any one particular way. There are so many ways that you can play this game. If you want to try to conquer the world, go ahead. If you just want to sit in your one spot and try to build up your economy as much as you can, go ahead. You want to be a major trade, power, go ahead. Do whatever you enjoy in this game. You don't have to do any one specific thing just because you've seen somebody else do it or they say, hey, you should do this. Do what you enjoy. Anyways, so with that said, I enjoy playing on hard, and we'll go ahead and go into the Ottomans. So we're not going to have Iron Man mode on because I play with mods quite often. You can't have a lot of mods enabled with Iron Man. Iron Man, essentially, it forces you to not be able to load older saves. You can only, it automatically saves at the time that you're exiting the game. Automatically saves every month is what my setup is right now. So essentially, Iron Man kind of it tries to restrict your ability to game the system or cheat, or go back if you made a bad decision. But Iron Man can't be active with a lot of the mods because they change a lot of the base game settings. They change a lot of the base game files. So I don't have it enabled most times simply because I'm usually playing with a modded game. But yeah, the Iron Man, honestly, don't worry about it unless you're really wanting to restrict your options, or unless you're really, really wanting to hunt for achievements, because you have to have it on for achievements. Otherwise, I don't worry about it, because achievements aren't a big thing to me. Okay, so right off the bat, once you get into the Ottomans here, right off the bat, you're going to see you have two different army stacks. And for new players, this is actually quite a few troops. A lot of nations, you'll see, like you have Serbia over here. That's their entire military right there, 7,000 troops. So we have twice that in our smaller stack. So as you can see, obviously we can crush them if they're by themselves. Same for Albania, 4,000 here, 2,000 here, though Corfu is part of Venice. But anyways, just giving you an idea that compared to a lot of other nations, we have a very big military. So one of the most useful things, if you ever hear me referring to, like in live streams or even in here, talking about clicking on your shield, I'm referring to this, which is essentially your country emblem. This is going to be one of your most useful things to be able to access, because this is where you're going to get a crap ton of the major information you're going to use for your nation. Probably, I would guess 70% at least of the information that I'm going to be using when I look up information is going to be through here, through my shield, as I call it. So right now what I'm going to is your military tab right here. This is going to give you all the basic information for your military that you're going to need early on. You're going to use it quite a bit, and you're going to be using it all throughout the game. So it's very important to know exactly what you're looking at in all of this. The very first thing I'm going to be showing, since that's something that I was talking about, was the size of my military. That's right here. So land force limit, whenever you see land force limit mentioned in this game, land force limit is specifically talking about how many troops you can have without extra maintenance, without any penalties. Now, you can have as many troops as you possibly want in this game, honestly. As long as you have money to buy them and pay for them, you can get, 1,000, you can get a land force limit of 1,000 right now if you want to, as long as you figured out how to get the money to do so. And the reason I say that is because you can take loans in this game, but eventually you'll take enough loans to go bankrupt. And once you're at the point of looking at bankruptcy, you can't get loans anymore, unless you declare bankruptcy. And if you declare bankruptcy, you get massive negative bonuses for your nation. But it does get rid of all your debt. Anyways, so land force limit is, like I said, what you can do without taking any negative penalties. So the Ottomans have a land force limit of 38 right now. That's 38,000 troops they can maintain before they start getting, excuse me, extra maintenance costs and stuff like that for their troops. Once you go over this land force limit, your maintenance costs start just jumping exponentially high. And there's plenty of times that I'll be over force limit when I'm playing nations, but I usually won't be over by a whole ton. Even once my nation is fairly rich and powerful, I still usually just maintain right around force limit or a little bit over if I'm trying to, let's say, have equal size stacks. Let's say I want to have all 15, size 15 stacks, which is 15 is this number right here. So this is a 16 stack. So whenever you hear us talking about stacks, that means one army. That's a stack of troops. And whatever number we say is the number of troops in that army. So this is a 14 stack since it's 14,000. A lot of times I like to go by multiples of 5. It's just a personal preference. You can go by whatever multiples you want. But a lot of the suggestions, a lot of the advice I'll be offering is going to be based on multiples of 5 or multiples of 10 for the size of stacks I usually make. Anyway, so like I was saying, if I wanted to keep everything equal, and let's say have as many troops as possible, I could have 3 15 stacks, so I'd be at 45 force limit, and my economy, which is over here, this shows how much money you're currently making, my economy could probably cover it, just based off my experience, but I'd have very little extra money coming in if I pumped myself up to 45,000 troops right now, because I would be over my force limit by quite a bit. So, yeah, my economy, I wouldn't be making much money. So, and it's much better to make extra money, to build other things in your nation, to build up your economy, to build extra buildings that are going to give you even more economic flow or more force limit for your troops, which, we were just covering. There's different buildings that can do stuff like that. So if you want to have higher force limit, there's multiple ways to do that, but one of the easiest ways and simplest is there are specific buildings you can eventually make which will improve your force limit. And that would be specifically regimental camps. Right there you see what that'll add to the province modifier of whatever province you click on, is that would add extra force limit. But kind of getting ahead of ourselves, let's keep going over the basics. So like I said, we have a very large starting army, because 30,000 is very strong. We start out with a decent general, because this is a general right here. What you can do with this is whenever you have a general available, you can assign them to a troop. You can also take away generals from the troops by clicking on no leader. So now we have no general. Now, you want generals with your stacks whenever they're fighting. Whenever there's a battle going on, you want a general in that battle, even if it's a really bad general, because that's just extra bonuses that you're going to get toward your troops in that battle. And that's more advanced stuff that we'll also cover, in another segment. But just know, something to keep in mind is you always want a general if you can help it. Always. Even if it's a crappy general. Because this right here is a very good general with these starting, these are what are known as pips right here. And these cover different things. This right here is a very good starting general. At the very beginning of the game, certain stats are going to be better than later in the game. It really depends on what part of history and where your military tech is at as to what pips are important. But in the beginning of the game, the most important pips you're going to be looking for are always going to be shock. So that's kind of one of the things that you're going to be looking for, is if you have a general with good shock, you're good to go. And this is something, like I said, we'll go into more detail on this in a different segment, really going into depth about all the different stuff for the military. I just wanted to kind of give a basic overview that this is a good starting general, and which also adds to the power for the Ottomans, along with having a large army. So, anyways, so beyond seeing we have a large army, we also have a pretty large navy. This actually is a very decent sized navy. There are a few navies that are larger than this, but the Ottomans, just for this region, have a very powerful navy at their disposal. There's not many other nations that can try to fight them. Venice can. If Castile gets the Iberian wedding with Aragon, Naples, they can kind of challenge the Ottomans, but not many other nations can really do anything to try to fight them in the Mediterranean. Mamluks are also somebody that can challenge the Ottomans, but they can't beat them. The Ottomans can have a stronger navy than the Mamluks can in the beginning, and they're obviously one of your big neighbors. Poland, Lithuania, Lithuania has no navy to speak of. Obviously, yeah, and to have a navy, by the way, you have to be bordering a water province. If you're not bordering a water province, like Poland is not, they're completely landlocked. They can't have a navy. Same for Wallachia, Bosnia. So, anyway, so we have a fairly large navy, large army. And this income, by the way, for new players, this is a very good income. If you're getting anything like +2 or more for your balance, which is how much money you're making after all your expenses, etc., that's a high income, believe it or not. +2 or more is a good income to have. And Ottomans started almost +10. And we will be over +10 once I get some of my starting actions out of the way. One of the first things I do is I always put up root out corruption. Corruption is something that can happen based on different events in the game. It's corruption in general is bad. I mean, sometimes you can use it to your advantage. There are some ways that you can use it to kind of mess around and play around with different aspects of the game. But my basic advice to brand new players, avoid corruption as much as you can. And the reason why we're putting out root out corruption to the max is because we want to get rid of corruption if we can help it. And, so if we gain any extra corruption, we want to get rid of it because it lowers your economy, etc. Anyways, so we maxed that out. The next thing I'm going to be doing, something that you should always do with every single nation you start out with, is I'm going to be getting rid of any forts that I don't need. So forts are these little things right here. It shows there's a fort there when you see that little castle symbol. So we have a couple different forts around our nation. I can't even say a couple. I think we have, 5 total that we start with? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, because we got one in Sugla down here. Anyways, so with forts are something that will block enemy armies' movement. They block enemies from moving through that territory the fort is in, and anything touching that territory, the fort also blocks the movement. So say we had an enemy army that wanted to move from Silister down to Constantinople. They'd have to go through Kirklees for that. They can't because of the fort at Edern. So what they would have to do is come here and siege this fort down before they could do that. So this fort actually blocks access through here and through here, not just through Edern. So that's one of the major things to know about forts. The other thing to know about forts is if you have a fort in a territory, and you engage an enemy, you become the defender in that battle. Even if you're attacking from another province and the enemy army is already there, you become the defender. And that's super important for the military aspect of this game because defenders, they get nice bonuses, or more accurately, they give negative bonuses to enemy armies when you're fighting. And what those can be based on, they're based on the terrain. They're based on whether or not there's a river crossing between those provinces. So there's a river crossing between Philippi and Edern here, or Philib and Edern. And so if somebody was trying to cross, a river crossing will give them -1 to all of their combat rolls. So they'll have a -1 to all of their chances to when they're fighting you in combat. And that can have huge, huge repercussions. That also ties into general pips. General pips give you bonuses, whereas terrain can give you negatives. See right here, it says dice roll for attacker -1, just like that river crossing. So if my army was sitting here in Philib and somebody attacked me, let's say from Edern, they'd get the river crossing -1, plus they get -1 from the woods here. So they already have -2 for all of their rolls against me. And then my general, which has 3 fire and 3 shock, which are your combat sections. Fire and shock are the 2 different phases of combat you have. Gives me +3. So if they don't have any general, my general essentially gives them, and I'm sitting in Philib, they essentially have -5 for all their combat rolls. And that's out of 10, by the way. I believe, no, out of 9. Because your dice roll is 9. Well, and there's not really any limit on how high your combat rolls can go. The only limit would be based on the dice rolls themselves, because the game automatically rolls a pair of dice digitally. and whatever your dice rolls are, kind of like D&D, combined with your general stats is what your roll ends up being. And the higher the rolls, the better. So that's why the negatives here can have a huge effect, because you're already having a -2 if you're attacking from Adern into Philippe, and an army sitting there. Like I said, though, let's say Philippe has a fort, and I'm sending an army from here into Philippe to attack somebody who's sitting there. I become the defender, so they actually get those negatives. But that's, like I said, that's more a combat side. But anyways, I just wanted to give a basic explanation of that, just to kind of show you the different things forts can do. They not only control army movement, because anybody who's coming around here has to kind of walk around my controlled provinces, or has to siege down the forts to get through my controlled provinces. So even if you're weaker than a neighbor who's attacking you, forts can really turn the tide of battle. It can really decide what's going to happen in a war. So that said, what I'm going to be looking at here is what areas my forts control, what access into my nation the forts control, and also what type of terrain they're on. So Adern is on grassland. Grassland is terrible because it gives no negatives for an attacker. That's why I hate grassland forts. Absolutely can't stand them. Same for farmlands. No negatives for attackers at all. So what you want for forts is you want them on terrain like woods, highlands, hills, mountains. Any of that terrain that you can get them on is going to be preferable. Anything that's not flatland terrain. Flatland terrain, drylands, grasslands, steppes, farmlands. Any of that stuff is bad for forts, unless you have to place it there to control access. But so these forts, like Adern, I'm going to keep Adern. Simply because I want to control the crossing here. This is the only way back and forth between my empire, between essentially the halves of my empire. So I'm going to keep that one, but my Selenik fort, I'm going to delete. The reason I'm deleting that is because I already have a fort at Adern. It's already controlling that. And yes, Selenik controls a little bit access over here, but they can easily just walk around to get access to any of these territories. So Selenik's not really doing anything but causing them to walk a little bit extra for their troop movements. And every fort you have is actually costing you extra money. So now look at that. My income went up by 1 ducat. So I'm making 1087 now instead of 987. And that's because forts cost maintenance. So early on, with whatever nation you're playing, you want to get rid of forts that aren't going to be doing major bonuses for you, that aren't really major controllers of your territory. So Sugla, I'm also going to get rid of it. Once again, grassland. Ankara, I'm keeping. Ankara blocks access up through here, forces all armies to have to go down through Karaman into the southern territories here if they're going to come from the Middle East territories, from Persia, etc. Plus, Ankara is on a highland, so I want to keep that one. It's a fort. Koseli, redundant, because it's not blocking access for the crossing, because even once I get Constantinople, Adern blocks all of that. Nobody can get past Adern until they siege it down right here. So Koseli, even though it's on a woods over here, it's already, the area is already blocked by Ankara. Plus Adern already does the job that Koseli would be doing right up here, and Koseli doesn't do as good a job because Adern blocks both of these crossings, which is what these dashes right here show. They show water crossings that you can make, and you can't really see that one as well, but it's there. So Koseli, once again, this is how I think about it, is redundant. It's not needed. It's just extra money that I could be making, that I could be investing into my economy. So see, my economy now has already gone up quite a bit. I've already gone up by 3 ducats by getting rid of 3 forts, sorry. So these other forts I'm going to keep simply because Adern's also on my capital, which you want to keep your capital protected if you can. Controls the crossings, and Ankara is good because it's a hard fort to take because I can easily defend it. Plus, it really forces everything into one bottleneck down here in the southern territories. So, yeah, and also that's a good point, Mr. Sia. Once you take Constantinople, it is a fort as well. So once I take it, there's an event that'll automatically move my capital there. And it will control the same things as Adern. So I'll be getting rid of the fort on Adern after I take Constantinople, and then I'll keep that fort. Eventually, you do want to build forts over time. If you really wanted, you could, and you had the money, and you didn't want to spend it on anything else, you could build a fort in Philippe. That's a really good fort spot. It actually completely protects your crossing here, plus gives you good terrain for fighting as a defender in. But that's, just more advanced stuff, like I said. This is just basic stuff I'm looking at the beginning. And the forts are a big one because I want to make sure I'm making as much money as possible. The other thing I'm going to do in the beginning is, as the Ottomans, I'm really looking at where do I want to expand right off the bat. And one of the big things you're going to be basing that on early on until you really know the game is your mission tree here. Now, the mission tree is from one of the DLC. Rule Britannia expands the mission tree into what you see here to give you a lot of options. And the mission tree, you don't have to follow it. Probably half of the nations that I play, I don't really follow along the mission tree just because I have other ways I like to expand that are more efficient, or just preference. But the mission tree, the basic way to think about it as a new player is it gives you guidelines on, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know where to go. Game, please, somebody tell me what should I be doing. Follow the mission tree. This will a lot of times give you really good guidance on what you should do with your nation. So this mission right here is owns Constantinople. This is showing what the requirement is to complete this mission. You complete it, you get defeated by Byzantine Empire for 15 years. Gives you following effects, which is tolerance to true faith, your legitimacy, which are both decent bonuses, and you gain permanent claims. The permanent claims are essentially claims that you have that will show up in your diplomatic mode. So see, I have claims on Albania right now, which is what that crosshatch means. That crosshatch means that that's a core province of mine. So I can take that with very little repercussion. Nobody around me will really care if I take that. It won't piss people off that much because it's considered part of my home territory. That's what a core province is. I don't have any other claims right now, but that's what completing this mission will give me is permanent claims on Moria, Achaia, and different stuff like that. So that's why the mission tree is a good one to kind of follow, is then you get those claims to where then you have another reason to declare war, a casus belli, which in this game, you don't want to just declare war without having a legitimate reason to do so. You don't want to just click on, Lithuania here and just say declare war. You get a lot of negative effects for doing that. You lose what's known as stability. You get aggressive expansion with other nations. Aggressive expansion essentially is how much they're pissed at you for taking over stuff. There's a lot of different negative effects. So there are times you can do no CB wars, as they're called, no casus belli, but it's not recommended, especially for new players. It's a more advanced strategy that you'll use. Anyways. So because of the fact that I have that as one of my first missions, the other thing to check though is notice I don't have any claims on Constantinople. I have, see, there's cores and claims. Only the Byzantines have the core and claim there. I don't have claims over here. Yeah, see, other nations have claims, but I don't, and this is where you can check that. So what I want to do right off the bat is then immediately send a diplomat. And this is what you can do with every nation you're playing. You figure out where you want to get your claims at, and then you can go into this list right here. And like I said, you're going to be using this a lot. You go into your diplomacy. And what I did is I opened up all these different sections because you're going to be using this stuff through here a lot. And there's a lot of different options through here to mess with, and it is very intimidating early on. But over time, it becomes just very natural to use all of these different options and know what you're doing. So early on, like I said, you're going to be doing what's known as a covert action. This is how you get claims on other nations. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building a spy network. So I have Byzantium selected. I'm going to click Build a Spy Network. They confirm. And you notice these are diplomats up here. I have 2 out of 3 available now. I had 3 out of 3 earlier. And that's because now my other diplomat, my third one, is working in Byzantium to create a spy network. Creating a spy network allows you to get information on that nation. It can give you information on where they're going to attack. It can give you information on quite a few things. But the biggest thing you generally use a spy network for is to get claims. So this right here is going to be your spy network. It's currently at size 0. Every turn, you're going to gain into that spy network based on your diplomat. So this right here shows you how much I'm gaining. If you look right there for the green number, it's 1.49. So I gain 1.49 spy network every month. So once I have 20 spy network, I can fabricate a claim. And that's why it's important to get a diplomat working right off the bat as soon as you're starting in a game. You want to get your diplomats fabricating in the places you want to expand into. With that said, I probably, with my experience in the game, I'm also probably going to fabricate into Wallachia, but we'll see, because I might get too much aggressive expansion with Byzantium. I might not be able to eat into Wallachia as well, but it's really dependent upon how my war goes with Byzantium, how much I piss other people off. The reason I would look at Wallachia as another quick expansion spot, and another quick nation to take over, is because Wallachia tends to be a very isolated nation. They tend to get killed by Hungary, and I would rather deny Hungary that territory right there, because Wallachia is a really, really nice state, and a state is this whole area you see, the state of Wallachia, which you can access by, you click on a province, you click on the other tab, it shows the state that they're in. It's a really nice state because it has a trade node for Constantinople, which is my main trade node. And also it has a lot of farmlands, and farmlands, you'll learn, are really preferred in this game. If you can take over territory. Anyways, so I'm going to probably fabricate on Wallachia. And since I'm not really worried about allies or anything, the only thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to check right here with production interface. This is another thing you're going to use just a lot of times as much as the shield. And you're going to go click down here on the diplomacy tab. This gives you different options than the shield does. So one thing you can check is under these are all different tabs here. Under the influence tab, you can check here what different options you have. So you can offer vassalization. This will tell you how close other nations are to becoming your vassals. And that is a big deal, because if you can vassalize a nation, as I covered in the last segment, vassals then essentially are part of your empire. You just can't control every aspect they do, but they do everything with you. They do your wars, if you're declaring war on people, or if you're attacked, they're part of your empire essentially, and you can eventually annex them. And you want vassals, nations that are anywhere from -10 or less. Those are possible vassals, and the reason why is because you have different things that you can do to cause them to go positive. Because once they're positive, they'll have a green check mark, and that means they'll vassalize to you. If they're -10 or less, you can do something as simple as a royal marriage in this game, which is part of your diplomacy, etc. And that royal marriage will automatically give you +10 for them choosing to vassalize to you or not. So I can get Sin Kefa to 0, and I can get Ramazan to +3 immediately. So they'll automatically want to vassalize to me. And like I was saying, though, that's an option that you can use instead of conquering people, because no one cares if you diplomatically vassalize someone. It doesn't piss anybody off at all. It's only if you force them to become your vassal through a war or something like that people actually get pissed. So if you can take vassals like him or him, which are the two nations I was looking at, rather than conquering them, you get nobody pissed off, which means you can expand into other territories instead. Anyways, so that's some of the early stuff you're going to be looking at. And I wanted to look at this first before I tried to send off diplomats to fabricate claims, like we were doing in Byzantium, because I want to see what nations I can possibly vassalize rather than conquering. Also, if I can vassalize them, a lot of times other powerful nations have a chance of vassalizing them as well. So I want to do it before other nations. With that said, let's look at one of the things that will affect how many nations you vassalize, etc. So right here, this is how many diplomatic relations you can have without having a negative. So diplomatic relations, we're at 1 out of 4. We're at 1 out of 4 because we're guaranteeing the independence of Ragusa right now, which is actually important, because if we don't do that, a lot of nations like Venice, etc., will try to eat them. And we'd rather deny that to them for now. So we can have 4 relations total. So we have 3 other relations we can get. And those relation slots are filled with personal unions will fill them, vassalizations fill them, alliances fill them, or guaranteeing independence. Like with Ragusa, we're guaranteeing their independence. So what we're guaranteeing is if anybody attacks that nation, we will defend them. It really gives a lot of pause to other nations. If you have, let's say, an area that you can't really conquer yourself, but you also don't want other people taking it, guaranteeing independence can be a good solution to that, especially if you can't ally said nation. We could ally Ragusa, but they're just one province. They're a one province minor, an OPM as they're called, and so they wouldn't be really a good nation to ally. But anyways, we just want to guarantee their independence right now, just because that's also a rich territory for other nations to take. It's a trade node. It's got pretty good development, and development, once again, is kind of how big a territory or a nation is. And it's grassland, so it's pretty good territory. It's a trade node. It's just something we want to deny to people for a little while, until we can take it. Anyways, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at, is there any nation we want to ally? Or do we want to just try to vassalize these two nations to fill those diploslots? So a way we can check that is once again going into the production interface, and we're going to look at alliance actions, offer alliance. So anything red is people that don't like us. They just, nope, Ottomans, go to hell, essentially. It's nations that are going to say no if we try to offer them an alliance. Anything in gray, and you can change that with some of these nations by changing their opinion of you. Any nations in gray is just don't bother. They absolutely don't like you. But anything in red is people that you might be able to change, but for some of them you can't. Like this one, the Mamluks. If you look at that, 5 positive versus negative 3,042. So you have to have at least positive 1 for them to agree to ally you. So we're over 3,000 away. It's never going to happen. One of the big things is historical rival. Historical rival, some nations just historically hated each other. Like England and France, stuff like that. They're nations that you will never, ever be able to get an alliance with. You'll never be able to be their friend. It'll just never happen. So if historical rival is one of the modifiers, you don't even bother. You don't even bother trying to get that nation as a friend of yours. See, whereas like France right here, so France is 7 versus negative 74. There's no historical modifier. There's no extra negatives like the Mamluks have. Unfortunately, since we're on hard, we also get that negative 20 if you look down through the list there. But yeah. So we wouldn't, excuse me, we would never bother trying to be friends with the Mamluks. That said, all these nations in green, they're nations that will automatically ally with us right now. Early on, you're going to want to choose nations, if you're really worried about it, you're going to want to choose nations that are decently powerful. And what I could say is, out of this list, the most powerful nations you're going to see out of all of these nations right here that are in the green, QQ as we call it, Kara Kionlu, Tunis, and Bohemia. Those are pretty much the 3 most powerful nations out of all of these nations here that you see. If you're going to choose any nations, you want to choose powerful ones. You also don't want to choose nations that are going to have powerful enemies attacking them right off the bat. Ajam is a decently powerful nation, but the problem is the Timurids right over here have all these little nations around them as vassals, and they're going to attack Ajam right off the bat. I don't want to get dragged into that war right now. Instead, I want to focus on my own expansions and my own wars. So I wouldn't become friends with Ajam, even though they're a fairly powerful nation. QQ is a good one, because the only people that are going to fight QQ are probably going to be the Mamluks, if anybody. And even then, the Mamluks would take a little while to get to there. So QQ are fairly powerful, good ally, really good buffer against Timurids or against the Mamluks, 2 large nations. And we can easily break our alliance later on and then attack them. Bohemia is a good one, because getting a Christian nation to actually like you, there's not very many that you can do that with. So Bohemia is a good one, especially because that will also deny Austria territory, because sometimes Austria will fight with Bohemia. Same for Poland. Sometimes Poland will attack into Bohemia. So getting them as a Christian ally really gives you a nice option for any of your European wars, of trying to drag them into the wars. Let's say for fighting Hungary, fighting Poland, fighting Austria, any of that stuff. It's just always nice to have them. Tunis is a good ally to have because if you don't, a lot of times Aragon will beat the crap out of them and eat into some of their territory. Um, and it also is a buffer against the Mamluks over in North Africa. Once you're allied with Tunis, it really denies the Mamluks territory. So all of these are good options for different reasons. So if we really want, what we can do is we could actually just fill all 3 of our alliance slots. And for newer players, I would probably recommend doing that. It will make things much easier for you to do so. So what I'm going to do is just the closest nation in terms of travel time is probably going to be Bohemia. So I'm just going to automatically offer them alliance. And by the way, to get right to these menus and whatnot, I'm right-clicking, just so that you know. So I'm going to offer Bohemian alliance before anybody else. And then I'll probably get QQ and then Tunis. And that way I have 3 nice satellite allies that can help me pretty much in any region that I'm fighting in. Or can rush to my defense no matter who tries to fight me. So yeah, for if I was playing, just one of my normal games, I probably wouldn't ally all of them. I'd probably only ally one of them and get some vassals. But for a new player, I'm going to recommend you absolutely get strong allies as much as possible until you're comfortable with the game. Anyways, so after that, I've got all of my diplomats working now because you want to have your diplomats busy as much as possible. Now what I'm going to be focusing on is I need to choose rivals. Now, rivals are nations that essentially you and the other nation are declaring, I hate you. I want to destroy you. Essentially pretty much what rivalries are. But you get bonuses against these other nations if you declare them as your rivals. Those bonuses make it to where you can fabricate claims faster. You're not going to have as much negatives for taking stuff from them in wars, etc. Rivals give you bonuses against other nations, essentially. As you can see right here, defeating them in battles, you get extra prestige, extra construction against them, less diplomatic cost for demanding provinces in a peace deal. It gives you nice bonuses against them. It also gives you bonuses in something called power projection. Power projection is essentially how strong other nations perceive you. And the higher your power projection, the bigger your bonuses you get from it, as you can see there. Your trade power, morale for armies and navies, prestige, defense, legitimacy, all of that. So, yeah, power projection is fairly important in the game. And the larger your nation is, the larger of a power in the world you are, a great power as it's called. See, that's where I'm at. The easier it is to really maintain power projection. Having rivals gives you power projection, and fighting those rivals and defeating them in wars gives you even more power projection. So, we're going to click on this list. So we have a lot of different rivals we can choose from. We know we're going to fight the Mamluks. We know the Mamluks historically and us hate each other. We know we're never going to be friends, so we're just going to automatically choose them as a rival. Now, with my experience in the game, I know that Lithuania, it has a 90% chance to be put into a personal union under Poland through an event which is needing a Jagiellon. It's an almost guaranteed event to happen. Poland rarely doesn't choose to have Lithuania in a personal union. So having them as a rival is actually a good idea, because every time you eclipse or become more powerful than one of your rivals to where they can no longer rival you, because you can only rival people that are close to you in power. Every time you eclipse a rival, you automatically get 10 power projection. So I'm going to choose Lithuania because it's almost guaranteed I'm going to eclipse them within the next 5 years, which will give me 10 power projection, which is just nice extra bonuses. And then, I mean, out of this, you really have a lot of options. Excuse me. Venice is a good option because Venice, they are fairly powerful at the very beginning, but they're not too big a threat. They can't really expand that much. The only places Venice generally expands into that you'll see is into Hungary, which is fine by me because Hungary is one of the other people threatening me. Austria, a lot of times I don't rival Austria because I'm not going to be fighting with them early on. I don't want to fight them. I'd much rather fight Hungary. Hungary is a much weaker opponent than Austria in the beginning of the game, once Austria really gets going. And that's because Austria is in what's known as the HRE, which is the Holy Roman Empire, a historic body that existed hundreds of years ago. And they start as the Emperor, which gives them lots of bonuses, like extra force limit or manpower to throw into their war, stuff like that. So Austria is not really somebody I like to rival early on, simply because I don't want to fight them early on. I want to fight people that I know I'm going to be guaranteed to be able to beat, or who are going to get put into personal unions to where I get that free power projection from it. Venice also starts off a bit stronger than Hungary, even though it shows their army is 45% weaker versus Hungary is 36% weaker. And this is kind of roughly equating their army size and their manpower versus yours. Even though it shows that Hungary's a bit stronger based on these numbers, Venice has vassals. And also it can get in what's known as a trade league. And nations that are in trade leagues together, essentially they have promises to defend each other in wars. So if you fight one trade league member, all the trade league members jump in. It's kind of like a NATO, alliance, Warsaw Pact, that type of stuff. So I don't want to mess with Venice. I'd much rather mess with Hungary. So we're going to go ahead and rival them. This covers another thing that you're going to do once your diplomats are back, because, like I was saying, you're going to keep your diplomats busy. Beyond getting these other nations as my allies, I'm also going to be doing things with my rivals. An option you have with your rivals is you can send insults to them. When you send an insult, that's going to give you some power projection. So obviously nice, and that'll slowly fall off, and then you'll eventually be able to insult your rival again to get that power projection back. Another thing you can do specifically to rivals with no negatives is you can issue an embargo. When you issue an embargo on one of your rivals, that also gives you power projection. And what you're doing there is you're messing with their trade income, the trade that they get in the different trade regions, which is what this map mode looks like. This is all your different trade regions. If you embargo a rival that shares trade regions with you, you'll get even more power projection versus, let's say, I was rivaled with France. They're way over here. We don't really share any of the trade areas, because I'm right here. France is over here. If I were to embargo France, I won't get as much as, say, embargoing Hungary, who shares part of my trade node here. So essentially, the more trade they share with you, the more power protection you're going to get for embargoing them. And that's something that you're going to be doing with your diplomats. You're going to insult one of your rivals because you can only get a bonus from insulting one. You can't insult all three of your rivals that you have here and get bonuses from each. But you can embargo each of them and get bonuses for that. So, and like I was saying, power projection, gaining it as high as possible, is important. It'll just give you nice passive bonuses. Okay, now, and those are kind of all the basics you're going to start with. I know I've really gone into detail with some of them. Some of it's possibly confusing. Mr. David, if you're still hanging out, feel free to kind of let me know things that are confusing you as a new player, because that'll really help me for these segments. Or, if there's anything that I didn't seem to cover well enough, let me know. Anyways, so I haven't unpaused the game yet because this game runs in real time, guys. So this right up here is the speed of the game and how fast it's going to be running. Most players you'll see are going to be running on usually speed 4, if you're playing single player, or speed 3, one of those two. When you first start out, I highly recommend speed 3 just because there's going to be a lot of stuff happening that you're not going to know what the heck is going on. So you can control this also without because you have to click up here if you want to unpause it. See? So boom, Bohemia just accepted an alliance from us. So that's just cool. That's what's going to happen is when you unpause the game, time's going to start actually running. The game's actually going to start processing, and things are going to be happening in the background. So none of this stuff is going on because I haven't unpaused the game. So we still have diplomats on their way to do stuff, etc. And we still have one or two other things to cover before we unpause. I just wanted to kind of go over the fact that I've been doing all this stuff, and I still haven't unpaused the game once. It still hasn't actually started running yet. Because this is just what you do to start out your game and get everything prepared. This right here is a little scroll that pops up when you have decisions available. And these are things that are, you used to have a mission tree in here, but now your mission tree is separate. So in here, you have national decisions. And these are different things that are unique to each nation. Some of them are the same for different nations. But usually, each nation has their own unique set of decisions only they get. So this right here says adopt the title of Khalifa. It tells you what you need to adopt it, which we have all of it covered. And then what you do is right here, this is how you accept it. You would click on this, and it tells you what bonus it gives you. So until the death of my ruler, I get 0.5 yearly prestige. Prestige is something that is heavily overlooked even by experienced players. It is actually a very important stat. You don't have to have lots of prestige, but it is very, very nice to do so. And if you can get positive prestige, you should. So that it gives us 0.5 prestige every year, and moves us 10 towards legalism. Legalism is something that is unique specifically to the Sunni religion, which is what we are, and we'll go over that in a quick sec. This is a good thing. Some players might prefer, because you have in Sunni of legalism or mysticism, you get different bonuses based on whichever direction you go. Did that get changed? What the? Sorry. That's interesting. Is my game messed up or something? Mr. Sir or anybody else who is experienced with the game, if you're here, could you guys check if Sunni got switched around? Because legalism is the one that's supposed to have the tax, technology, manpower bonuses, and mysticism is supposed to have missionary strength, morale of armies, fort defense. So that's kind of messing me up right there. Anyways, like I was saying, so this moves us toward legalism, gives us yearly prestige, which is generally a good thing. So we'll click that. Now this right here, you can see what the needs are. This move gives us national unrest -1 and moves us toward legalism as well until the death of our ruler. So national unrest is pretty much how upset your territories are. When your territories are upset, you can have rebellions. If this number right here is ever positive, then that's bad. Essentially, that's the thing to remember for this. Positive is bad. Negative is good. Negative means they have negative wish for rebellion. They don't want to revolt against you at all. They aren't pissed at all. See, here's our unrest right here in our tab when we click on a province. You don't want provinces to want to rebel, obviously, because rebellions are bad for any empire. Because then you have to fight the rebels, put down the rebellions, etc. And some rebellions can lead to more rebellions. Anyways, so national unrest -1 is a good thing. Now this part right here, this is enforcing religious unity. And it's missionary strength versus heretics until the death of our ruler. What that means is you have missionaries in the game that can convert provinces to your religion as you conquer them. So we are a Sunni nation, and we are obviously bordering lots of Christian nations, Catholics and Orthodox. We also have Coptics, which is a Christian religion, and then we have Shia, which is part of our faith group, but isn't Sunni, obviously. So being able to convert these provinces to our religion is good, because if a province isn't your religion, it creates unrest for that province. So because the people, obviously, they don't want to be, if your nation isn't their religion, they aren't happy with that, for obvious reasons. Anyways, so what this does is this gives your missionaries extra strength toward converting provinces toward your religion, because it takes time to convert these provinces, time and money. So right now, after all negatives and positives are considered, we have 1% missionary strength to convert this province. So when we take this and we'll reread it again. So it says missionary strength versus heretics, right? So you have heretics and heathens. So heretics are going to be part of your same religious group, but not your religion itself. And that would be, right now for me, Shia. So any Shia provinces that I take and want to convert, this will give me extra strength toward converting that. Versus these are heathens. Heathens are a different thing. So that's only going to be helping me with kind of my same religious group, but a different section of it. I'm not getting any bonus toward the heathens, unfortunately. But I am getting bonuses toward heretics. Now I have 3% missionary strength here instead of just 1. So things like that are really nice, because it helps you convert provinces faster. It makes it cost less to convert them because you're converting them faster, stuff like that. And you want to have as much religious unity as you can, which is affected by how many of your provinces aren't following your religion after bonuses and stuff like that. The lower your religious unity, the more negatives you're going to have. As you can see right there, it gives unrest in the red numbers. It makes stability cost more. It gives us corruption. And stability, like I said, is a fairly important stat up here. Stability actually gives you bonuses. As you can see, each level of positive stability gives you lower unrest, more tax, more missionary strength, less corruption, more institution spread. It just makes the next level of stability cost more. That's all. And you can go up to +3 stability. So that's why high religious unity, is important, not only for the unrest and corruption that we already covered, but for your stability costs and stuff like that. Anyways, so these other decisions we have, let's see, we have military power at least 100. We lose 100 military power. Ottoman gets Devshirm system until the end of the game. Oh, I have a call. Anyways, that gives us extra manpower, so it's obviously a good thing. Give me 1 sec. Okay, sorry about that phone call. Anyways, so we got that. What that was 10% manpower, which is a good thing. And it says until the end of the game, so it's a permanent buff that our nation now gets. Manpower essentially is, if you think about it, it's your reserve troops. When we go into a war, you're always going to have troops that you're holding in reserve for as troops fall on the front line, you then send in the reserve troops to reinforce them. That's what manpower is. It's as troops in your armies die, you will then pull from your manpower to replace those troops. That's the simplest explanation of manpower that I can give. So having 10% extra manpower, you can see that bonus up there, the Devshirm system, means that we have 10% more manpower overall, which is obviously good because we have more reinforcement troops. You have these other decisions here. You'll notice they don't have the green check mark next to them. And that's because we can't do them yet. We don't have that option. And some of these decisions you would really have to weigh whether or not you wanted to get them. Because this decision right here would give you 10% more tax, which is more toward your tax side of income. And you have 3 different sections of income, but this specifically goes towards your tax. And so 10% tax is nice, but then you also have +1 unrest. So that means that all your provinces then gain +1 unrest permanently until the end of the game, but you get 10% more tax. You'd have to weigh if it was worth it to have that extra unrest, the extra risk of rebellions and stuff like that, versus having 10% extra tax coming in. And that's just some of the stuff that you have to really weigh here is the positives and negatives of it. Sometimes it's just absolutely not worth it, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it's very situational based on whatever is going on in the game. Some ideas I will take during one playthrough that I won't take during another playthrough, just based on my situation. And that's just stuff you'll learn to really judge over time, is whether or not you want to have the positive versus the negative. Anyway, so that's your national decisions. The other thing you can be doing early on is you can have missionaries working. The missionaries will then work to convert your provinces. And this right here is showing you different provinces I have. The unity it's covering is how much religious unity it gives me to convert that province. How much this will go up right here. This shows me the amount of time it will take to convert those provinces. Now, the monthly cost here is affected by a mod I have. A mod I have that turns off the missionary conversion cost for everyone, not just me, but for the AI as well. But most times you would have a monthly cost here, and in the next patch, that's going to be lowered. So, actually, I think they're drastically lowering it. Yeah, so monthly cost isn't really going to be as big of a factor in what you decide to convert in the future. Anyway, so since this is going to give me 3% religious unity and it's the fastest, I'm going to do that right now because I want to get that converted if I can to get more religious unity. Just a good idea. Now you notice this popped up. This is political or provincial unrest, not political. So what that tells me is that in Sivas now, I actually have people that are not happy. I have some extra unrest. So what that's going to do is that's actually going to slowly build up to possibly get separatists here. because I can see what type of unrest it is. Now, what unrest does over time is it builds rebels. So what this shows is that I have a 4% chance every month of increasing rebel progress by 10%, and if it reaches 100, then that province will have a rebellion. It'll have a rebellion of 7,000 troops that will pop up in that province. Now, this is only showing one province, but this can be multiple when it comes to rebellions and unrest. You could have multiple provinces that are contributing toward a rebellion, and that means that you'll have whatever the troops show, you could have them all pop up in one of those provinces, or they can be split amongst the different provinces that are all contributing toward that rebellion. Since this is only one province, we know we're going to have 7,000 pop up here if that ever reaches 100. And it gives you a rough estimate of when that'll happen. So it'll take 20 years. This isn't something I'm worried about at all. And the reason I say that is because the only thing contributing to this is because I'm forcing those people to convert. It's pissing them off that I'm changing their religion. Since that's going to be done in 32 months, which is what it told me, because this is by months right here, I know that 32 months isn't even 3 years. So it's not even close to the roughly 20 that it estimates it would take for this place to rebel. So I'm not worried about it at all. But that's something you want to do early on, is if you need to convert any provinces, do it. As long as it's not going to take, like 200 months. This is too long. You don't want to ever try to convert stuff like that because it's just not worth it. So I've got my missionary working. I've got my diplomats already working, and I have plans for what to do once they come back. Let's go ahead and check this. Sometimes with nations, once you have enough money and sailors out there, you can get what's known as a naval doctrine. Naval doctrine's pretty important to choose early on when you can, because it can affect your navy very drastically. Naval doctrine also is very location dependent, but for the Ottomans, we're going to be focusing on 3 things. Naval maintenance doesn't matter because we're making so much money, and naval maintenance is pretty negligible anyways. It doesn't cost very much. So we're not going to worry about naval maintenance. What we're going to worry about is these 3. Now, first one we look at is galley combat ability. The majority of our navy, our naval power is galleys. These are transports. Transports don't really have much combat capability. They're not very good ships to try to use to fight with, because these are transports right here, cogs. So this shows you their stats, how many cannons they have, how much health they have, essentially. So they have quite a bit of health, but very, very little offensive power. So we're not really worried about cogs for our combat ability. What we're worried about is our galleys. Those are our main combat ships right now because we don't have any heavies yet. Now, galleys are super, super effective only in inland seas, which is areas that will literally tell you they're an inland sea. The open ocean out here, this is not an inland sea. See, it says open sea. Doesn't say, see, no inland sea modifier versus right here, inland sea, inland sea. This is an inland sea. Galleys get a bonus in inland seas, which is why I'm going over it. And that bonus essentially doubles their combat capabilities as long as they're fighting in an inland sea. So that makes them very, very cost effective because galleys themselves don't cost much to make. So we're going to go into our production interface just so I can show you this. Here's our naval units. So galleys cost 10 ducats to make, and they only have 0.03 maintenance per month. Now, carracks overall are better than galleys. I mean, just by far. You can see the stats here show they're way better. But carracks cost 50 ducats to make 5 times, and look at that maintenance. You could make, what is that? Looks like 14 galleys. Yeah, you could make 14 galleys for the maintenance cost of 1 carrack. You could have 14 galleys that you're maintaining instead. So they are super, super cost effective. Now the only reason though that you will eventually go for carracks when you have a very strong economy is because they are far stronger than galleys when it comes to combat, and you do have a naval force limit just like you have an army force limit. But for the early side of things, we're going to be focusing on galleys for any of our inland sea nations like the Ottomans. And that gives a lot of precedence or a lot of preference toward galley combat ability because that just obviously increases their combat capabilities by 15%. The other things that we're going to be looking at is ship trade power, which is nice because that's more trade income because you have what are known as trade ships, these light ones right here. These are your trade ships. and they can actually perform a mission to protect trade or to privateer, which will increase your income in those trade regions that you do it in. So that's another thing you can consider. And then, of course, your final one right here, that's a chance to capture enemy ships. That can be good because what that means is you have a chance every time you fight an enemy fleet to capture their ships. So that would really, really increase your navy size very quickly if you're fighting someone who's equal or a little bit weaker than you are, as long as you're winning your naval engagements. That could be a really good way to increase your fleet size and keep yourself on top during a war. So either of these is a very good choice, honestly, right now. We're not worried about economy right now. We don't have a lot of trade ships, so this isn't really going to give us a lot. These right now are our big choices. And either of them is perfectly viable, honestly. Since we have such a good economy, though, building new ships isn't really a big concern for us. So that, for me, lowers the how appealing chance to capture enemy ships is. So I'm actually going to be going for galley combat ability, simply because I don't need to capture enemy ships. I'll just build new ones if I really need to. Okay, and that pretty much has shown all the different options we have. The last thing that we're going to be doing, and this is just getting started before we even unpause it, like I was saying, is you have what are known as advisors. Now, you have these numbers up here, because obviously there's a lot of stuff I haven't gone over. But you have these numbers up here, which are military, diplo, and admin power. These are what are known as monarch points. Just a second, Pup. Dog really wants out. What these are is essentially, the way to think of these is monarch points are everything in this game. They're your research points. They're points for your economy. I mean, they're points for everything, because you have so many different things you can do with them. You can make territories have more development, which we covered is how developed they are, is how strong of a nation they are, how industrialized they are. Monarch points can add to that. Monarch points cover right here your technology. You need monarch points for technology. You have what are known as idea groups, and and these are how you can really customize your nation to where no playthrough ever has to be the same for the same nation you play. You can get these, and these cost monarch points to get. Monarch points, essentially, if you want to hire another general, you spend monarch points for that. Monarch points essentially are the most important, thing that you're going to get in this game. They're more important than pretty much anything else. Your rulers directly attribute to that. So I have an awesome ruler here. He gives crap tons of monarch points, because 666 is the absolute best stats your ruler can have. Sign of the devil, right? If your ruler has 666 for their stats, that is a godly ruler that you almost never see. So this is a really, really good ruler right here. Because you can have rulers that are 000. I mean, it happens. So what I was, anyways, going over is you have advisor slots. These advisors are people you can hire. They cost monthly income, but they give you monarch points in exchange for said monthly income. And the higher the economy you have, the better your early advisors can be. So, what we're going to be doing is you look for the advisors you want. Missionary strength is nice, obviously, because we have to convert right now. Stability cost, it's not super important. Production efficiency, not super important because we don't get a lot of money from production. But the production efficiency also has +2 for the admin that it gives us every month to add on to our monthly increase. So because of that could make this a little more appealing. That said, you can also pay to upgrade advisors. It's just a fairly expensive cost. Since we're doing conversions right now, I'm actually going to get the missionary strength advisor. And these are random, by the way. It's random whatever you have access. And then I have the option to promote him, which will increase his monthly cost, but also increase the amount of admin he gives me every turn. So I'm going to go through and at least get 111s for everything, but I'll probably promote some people. Let's see. We have diplomatic reputation, which is good. Trade is good because we're making some trade money. And improved relations is good. I'm not going to go into detail on these right now. I'm just going to go for the improved relations. Improved relations directly affects your aggressive expansion, which is how pissed other nations get at you. And since I'm going to be aggressing quite a bit, I'm going to be going for this Improve Relation Advisor because I want to be able to keep that low. The Trade Advisor, by the way, is also a good choice here because that increases your trade income, so it kind of offsets some of the cost. The final advisor we're going to look at, manpower is really good early on since we're lacking some of it right now. Morale is also good for your early fighting. Force limit, I rarely go for force limit advisors just because you could build over force limit, then your advisor dies, and all of a sudden you're way over force limit and paying all this extra upkeep for it. I don't like force limit advisors specifically because of that, but in certain situations they could be useful if you're fighting a large opponent. I prefer morale or manpower. In this situation, I'm not going to be facing anybody that really has any scary military capability early on, so I'm going to be focusing on manpower instead. Plus, that gives me the extra +2, and I'm not paying extra to promote this guy. So that's how I'm choosing my advisors. Also, we have a focus right now on military. Focusing is where you can take one monarch point from the other monarch point types, and you can attribute it to another. So I'm getting +2 to my military right now, and it's taking 1 away from my Diplo and from my admin. You focus based on what you're really trying to get. And getting early military techs over your opponents is actually really big. So I'm just going to leave that focus alone. You can only switch your focus every 15 years. So it's really important to know exactly what you want to focus on in the foreseeable future. So I'm going to be leaving this alone right now just so I can get my military tech done. So there we go. I essentially have everything set. I haven't built any new troops yet, which is something else you'll do based on obviously where you're going to go. But that's kind of my early setup for what I'm doing for the Ottomans before even unpausing the game. I still can do little things like I'm going to send this guy off to protect trade real quick. My advice for that, figure out where you have traders pushing trade forward, which is what these icons show here, and figure out which one's going to give you more profit. Easiest way to just do it early on. We'll get into trade in another section to explain in more detail. But that's the easiest way to really do stuff with your traders early on. There's a lot of other options you have, but for, once again, brand new players, just send them to the one that shows it's going to give you more profit out of the place that your traders are working. For your main fleet here, this combat fleet, you don't have to do anything with them. Leave them in port. Allow allies, allow friendly fleets to attach. This allows allied armies to walk across your ships to use your transports, and this allows other fleets to attach to your fleet and join them into one big armada. So I always leave those on with my main fleet. With my trade fleets, that's actually something important. This right here, this essentially tells them to hide when wars are declared. I do that for all my trade fleets so that they don't get caught by enemy fleets, in the open waters and destroyed. They automatically go to port and hide. Those are just little things to go over real quick. But yeah, that's kind of a basic overview of what you're going to do right in the very beginning before you even unpause the game. Like I said, Mr. David, if you're still here, just let me know if there's anything that's been confusing so far or anything that you think I didn't cover well enough. And yeah, I hope so far this is kind of helping new players to understand a lot of the different things to look at and understand why there's going to be so many different video sections because there's so much information to this game and so many things to get into. So